Four cadets closed in tight, doubt and challenge in their eyes. In less than a minute's fight, a colonel's strength would rise. If you love stories of courage and true leadership, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Don't forget to hit that bell icon so you never miss a moment of inspiration. Now, let's dive into the story of how one brave colonel changed everything in less than a minute. Asterisk. The small town of Millbridge, tucked away between rolling hills and sprawling fields, was a place where everyone knew each other's names and stories. It was the kind of town where news traveled fast, and reputations were hard to change once set. On the outskirts of town sat the Millbridge Military Training Base, a modest but respected facility where young men and women prepared themselves for the demands of service. Colonel Sarah Reynolds had been stationed there for 5 years now. A woman of quiet strength, she carried herself with the calm confidence of someone who had weathered many storms. But despite her rank and years of service, not everyone at the base treated her with the respect she deserved. This morning started like any other. The sun was just breaking through the clouds, casting a soft golden glow over the shooting range where the cadets gathered. Sarah stood near the benches, observing the trainees as they practiced their drills. She noticed a group of 4 cadets who were whispering and glancing her way. She knew their type, the ones who doubted a woman could lead, who thought her commands were just empty orders to be ignored. As she approached, the whispers turned to sneers. "Look who's trying to tell us what to do," one muttered loudly. "Enough for her to hear. Think she's tough? Wait till she tries to keep up with us." Sarah felt the sting of their words, but refused to show it. She had learned long ago that strength wasn't about proving others wrong with words, but with actions. She cleared her throat and addressed the group firmly. "Cadets, form up. We're running a timed exercise today, and I expect full attention." The leader of the 4, a tall young man named Jackson, smirked. "Or what, Colonel? You'll try to shout louder?" The others chuckled, the disrespect thick in the air. Sarah's jaw tightened, but she stayed composed. "Or you'll answer to." "And me? Now move." The cadets reluctantly lined up, still sneering under their breath. Sarah scanned their faces, not just at the challenge before her, but at the deeper issue. These weren't just cadets testing limits. They were reflecting a culture that underestimated her, a bias she battled daily. She took a deep breath, pushing the frustration aside. Today was about more than a drill. It was about setting a tone, about showing these young soldiers that leadership came in many forms, and it deserved respect. The timer started, the air filled with the sharp cracks of rifle fire. Sarah watched closely, noting each mistake, each moment of hesitation. Then it happened, a sudden shout from behind her. She turned quickly to see the 4 cadets closing in, their expressions hard and mocking. "Thought you could just bark orders and be respected?" Jackson sneered, stepping forward. "Let's see what you're really made of." The moment stretched. Sarah was surrounded. 4 young soldiers, full of arrogance and doubt, standing inches from her. The rest of the range fell silent. Everyone waited. In less than a minute, Sarah would show them all exactly who she was, not with words, but with the steady calm of a true leader. The 4 cadets closed in, their faces hard with skepticism and challenge. Jackson's smirk didn't fade. He looked down at Colonel Sarah Reynolds, a woman who had been their superior in rank, but, to them, an easy target for disrespect. "Thought you could just bark orders and expect us to fall in line?" Jackson said, voice dripping with mockery. "We're not some kids to be bossed around." The others laughed quietly, shifting their weight, circling her like predators testing their prey. Sarah felt the weight of their disdain pressing in. But she stood tall, her eyes steady and unflinching. Her mind raced, not with anger, but with calm calculation. She had been here before, in different ways, in different places. The sneers, the doubt, the invisible barriers. But she had never let them break her. "Cadets," she said clearly, voice firm but without hostility. "Respect isn't given because of rank alone. It's earned every day by actions. Not by words, but by what you do when it matters most." Jackson stepped closer, his tone low and challenging. "What are you going to do? Prove it to us?" Sarah didn't answer immediately. Instead, she glanced at the timer still running by the range, the distant sounds of rifles firing echoing around them. The moment was a test of her patience, her authority, and their character. Then she spoke, calm and precise. "Stand down. Now, or I will have to report this behavior, and it won't be the first time." The threat hung in the air, but the 4 cadets weren't backing down. Their challenge was clear, to see if she would buckle, or to see if she could stand her ground out suddenly. The sound of footsteps approached the base sergeant, a stern man named Harris, who had watched the exchange from a distance. "Colonel," Sergeant Harris called out, his voice carrying authority. "Is there a problem here?" Sarah took a breath and nodded. "Yes, Sergeant. These cadets are challenging my orders and disrespecting the chain of command." Harris's eyes scanned the group and then settled on Sarah. He nodded slightly, a silent show of support that she had come to appreciate over the years. "Cadets," Harris said, his tone sharp, "this is unacceptable. You will fall in line immediately or face consequences." The 4 looked around, hesitation flickering in their eyes. The tension broke as they backed away slowly, their arrogance replaced by grudging respect as they moved back to their positions. Sarah felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion. This was the everyday fight she faced, not just against disrespect, but against an ingrained attitude that underestimated her, because she was a woman. Later that day, alone in her office, Sarah sat down and allowed herself a moment to breathe. The walls around her were decorated with photos and awards silent, reminders of her years of service and sacrifice. But no plaque or medal could erase the daily battles she fought to prove herself. She thought about those 4 cadets, their youthful arrogance, and the long road ahead to earn their true respect. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the layers of discipline and strength, a quiet determination was growing. This wasn't just about one confrontation. It was about changing a culture, one cadet, one order, one moment at a time. The quiet of Colonel Sarah Reynolds' office was a stark contrast to the restless noise of the training range. She sat behind her desk, her fingers tracing the rim of a cold coffee cup, her mind replaying the morning's events. 4 cadets had challenged her authority, not just by words, but by their entire attitude. But this was not the first time she'd faced this kind of resistance. It was a pattern, a shadow that had followed her through every step of her military career. Sarah's thoughts drifted back to the beginning years ago, when she was fresh out of the academy, full of hope and determination. She had arrived at her first base with a bright uniform and a binder full of plans, but almost immediately she felt the weight of unspoken doubts from her male colleagues. The whispered comments about women in the military, the subtle sidelining, the assumptions that she wasn't tough enough or capable enough. It was relentless. Her first commanding officer, a gruff man named Captain Miller, was perhaps the harshest. He didn't openly oppose her, but the cold shoulder, the overlooked assignments, and the ever-present skepticism cut deeper than any insult. Sarah remembered the sting of being excluded from critical meetings or having her suggestions dismissed without consideration. But she never gave up. Instead, she let her work speak louder than words. She trained harder, studied longer, and pushed herself beyond what anyone expected. Slowly, bit by bit, she earned small victories, commendations, successful missions, and eventually promotions. Yet the battle against bias remained. Now, years later, at Millbridge Military Training Base, she was a colonel. She was in charge. But some of the young cadets still saw her as an obstacle to mock rather than a leader to respect. She looked out the window, seeing the green expanse of the training, fields bathed in afternoon sunlight. Beyond the range, the small town of Millbridge stretched out, familiar and quiet. It was a town where tradition ran deep and change often moved slowly. That reality weighed heavily on her dot. Her phone buzzed a message from Captain Miller, the man who had once doubted her but now worked in a neighboring base. "Keep your head up, Sarah. You're stronger than they realize." The simple words warmed her. She knew she wasn't alone, but sometimes the isolation felt overwhelming. Just then, there was a knock on the door. Lieutenant Ramirez, a young officer known for her sharp mind and quiet loyalty, stepped in. "Colonel Reynolds, the base commander, requested a meeting regarding this morning's incident." Sarah nodded. "I'll be there in 5. As Ramirez left, Sarah gathered her notes and stood, straightening her uniform. This was more than a reprimand or a report. The morning's confrontation was about to stir up deeper questions about leadership, discipline, and respect that affected the entire base. Walking down the hall, Sarah thought about how many times she had been underestimated, not just by the cadets, but by the system itself. She remembered the nights spent studying manuals, the grueling physical training, the countless hours away from family. She had sacrificed much to get here. The meeting room was austere, with a long table and a handful of senior officers sitting around it. At the head was Colonel Jenkins, the base commander, a man respected for his fairness, but known for his strict adherence to protocol. "Colonel Reynolds," Jenkins began, his voice calm but firm, "we've received reports about the incident with the 4 cadets. Disrespect toward command cannot be tolerated. However, we also recognize the challenges you face in leading a diverse group with varying backgrounds." Sarah listened carefully, noting the diplomatic tone. She spoke up clearly. "Sir, the disrespect is a symptom of a larger issue. These cadets don't just question me because I'm their superior. They question me because I'm a woman in a role many still see as male only." A few heads nodded. Jenkins considered this. "I understand. We must ensure that all cadets learn the importance of respect and discipline, regardless of the leader's gender or rank." "Exactly, sir. But it requires more than just rules. It requires culture change. I'm committed to making that happen here." Jenkins smiled faintly. "And you won't be doing it alone. We'll support you with training programs, mentorship, and clear consequences for insubordination." Sarah felt a surge of hope. The system might be slow, but it was listening. The meeting ended with a renewed sense of purpose. Outside, the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the base. In her office, Sarah pulled out a worn photo from her desk drawer. It was of her younger self, standing proudly at graduation. Beside her was her mother, a strong woman who had raised Sarah alone after her father's death. Her mother's sacrifices were the roots of Sarah's own strength. Tears pricked her eyes. She had come so far, but the road was still long. Suddenly, the phone rang. It was Sergeant Harris. "Colonel, I need to talk to you about those cadets. There's more going on than just disrespect. They've been involved in some off-duty trouble." Sarah frowned. "What kind of trouble?" "Vandalism near the base. It's nothing major, but it's troubling. They might be acting out because of tensions here." Sarah felt the pieces falling together. The disrespect, the defiance, the trouble off the base, they were connected. These young soldiers were struggling with their own battles. She knew what she had to do next. The afternoon sun was sinking low behind the tree-lined hills surrounding Millbridge Military Training Base. Colonel Sarah Reynolds sat in her modest office, the weight of the new information settling heavily on her shoulders. Sergeant Harris's news about the cadets' off-duty misconduct wasn't just a minor incident. It was a red flag signaling deeper unrest. She rubbed her temples, the steady hum of the bass outside, doing little to soothe the growing knot of concern inside her. The cadets' disrespect had been one thing, but now this? Vandalism? It wasn't just insubordination. It was a symptom of something far more troubling. Sarah stood and began pacing the room. What had started as a challenge to her authority was now blossoming into a potential crisis. And it was her responsibility to fix it not just as a colonel, but as a leader who believed in the promise of every young soldier under her command. Her thoughts turned to the 4 cadets Jackson, they, cocky leader; Marcus, whose silence hid deeper frustrations; Blake, quick to mock, but perhaps masking insecurity; and Tyler, the quiet one who followed along, but rarely spoke up. She needed to understand them, not just discipline them. The next morning, Sarah made a decision. Instead of another drill or a strict lecture, she called for a group meeting with the 4 cadets in a quiet room near the barracks. The room was small, with plain walls and a round table in the center. The kind of place where honesty had a chance to surface if people were willing to listen. Jackson and the others arrived, their expressions guarded but curious. Sarah motioned for them to sit. I want to talk not about orders or discipline, but about what's really going on, she began. You're good cadets. You've got potential. But I see the tension, the frustration. I know you don't respect me fully. And that's fair. I've been underestimated my whole life. Jackson snorted, but Sarah held his gaze. I'm not here to lecture you. I want to understand. What's behind the anger? The trouble off base? Talk to me. The room was heavy with silence at first. Then Marcus spoke quietly. It's hard sometimes. We feel like we don't fit in, like we're being judged before we even try. Some of us have problems back home. This place, it's supposed to be a fresh start, but it's not always that simple. Blake nodded, his usual sarcasm gone. And when we see someone like you, someone who doesn't fit the mold, telling us what to do, it just makes it harder. Like, why should we listen if we don't think you understand? Sarah's heart ached with empathy. Here were young men, trying to find their place in a rigid world, struggling with their own doubts and pain. I get it, she said softly. I've had to fight to prove myself every day. But respect goes both ways. I want to earn yours, and I want to help you earn your own. But that takes trust, and it takes responsibility. Jackson shifted in his seat, his eyes less defiant now. So what? You want us to just snap to attention because you're a colonel? No, Sarah replied. I want us to work together, to be a team that has each other's backs. That means no more vandalism, no more disrespect. But it also means you come to me if you're struggling. We fix problems before they break us. Tyler finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. It's just hard. We want to be better, but sometimes the pressure, it gets to us. Sarah nodded. Pressure can break you, or it can make you stronger. That choice is yours, but you're not alone. I'm here to help you find that strength. The conversation continued, slowly breaking down walls of mistrust. By the time the meeting ended, Sarah could see a flicker of something new hope, maybe, or at least the first step toward respect. Over the following weeks, Sarah worked closely with the cadets. She set up mentorship sessions, brought in counselors, and created small challenges designed to build trust and teamwork. The transformation wasn't immediate or easy. There were setbacks, arguments, moments of defiance, and the ever-present shadow of old prejudices. But through it all, Sarah remained steady a rock in a sea of uncertainty. One evening, as she walked back from a late strategy meeting, she caught sight of the 4 cadets practicing drills under the fading light. They moved with precision, their earlier arrogance replaced by a quiet determination. Jackson looked up and caught her eye. He gave a small nod, an unspoken acknowledgement. Sarah smiled softly to herself. The road to respect was still long, but for the first time, she believed they were walking it together. The weeks following that pivotal meeting were some of the toughest Colonel Sarah Reynolds had ever faced. Change was slow, especially when it involved people's deeply held beliefs and fears. But she was determined to see it through. Sarah had spent years fighting, not just for her own respect, but for every woman who came after her in the military. Yet she understood now that leadership wasn't about forcing respect, it was about earning trust. One difficult step at a time. Each morning, she arrived early at the base, often catching the cadets as they gathered before drills began. Some days, Jackson still held on to his skepticism, but others, she could see glimmers of genuine effort, small moments where pride and commitment overcame arrogance. But progress wasn't without setbacks. One afternoon, news reached Sarah that the vandalism hadn't stopped. Worse, it had escalated. Graffiti appeared on base property, hurtful words painted across the walls of the training hall. Worse still, there was talk of sabotage equipment being tampered with, threatening the safety of the entire unit. The base commander called an emergency meeting. This kind of behavior undermines everything we stand for. Colonel Jenkins sighed grimly. Colonel Reynolds, I expect you to take swift action. We need to root out whoever is responsible. Sarah swallowed hard. The actions of a few threatened to undo the fragile progress she had fought so hard to build. She didn't want to believe her 4 cadets were involved, but the signs pointed in that direction. The weight of responsibility pressed on her chest like a heavy stone. That evening, Sarah requested a private meeting with Jackson, Marcus, Blake, and Tyler. We need to talk, she said when they arrived, her tone serious but calm. There's been more vandalism, this time worse. Sabotage that could put lives at risk. The room went cold. The 4 exchanged uneasy looks. I want to give you a chance to come forward, Sarah continued. If you know anything, now is the time to speak. Jackson's jaw tightened. We didn't do it. Sarah looked him in the eyes. I want to believe you. But if you're involved, you're risking everything. Your careers, your futures, your comrades' safety. Silence. Finally, Tyler spoke quietly. We don't all agree with everything that happens around here. Some of us feel forgotten, ignored. Feeling forgotten doesn't justify putting people in danger, Sarah said softly, but firmly. Marcus nodded. But maybe some of it isn't just about us. Maybe the base itself has problems nobody talks about. Sarah leaned forward. Tell me. What followed was a long, honest conversation. The cadets shared stories of frustration, not just their own, but among other trainees. There were whispers of unfair treatment, favoritism, and a culture that didn't always support those who struggled. It was a harsh truth, one Sarah had seen but hadn't fully understood until now. She realized that the problem was bigger than a few bad actors. It was a system in need of repair. Over the next days, Sarah began working behind the scenes. She met with counselors, trainers, and other officers to address these concerns. She pushed for new policies to create a safer, more supportive environment. For every cadet. At the same time, she confronted the 4 cadets again, making it clear that sabotage or violence would never be tolerated, and that she believed in giving second chances, but only if they were willing to prove themselves. Turning point came during a grueling field exercise. Sarah watched as the cadets worked together to complete a difficult obstacle course. It was clear they were no longer divided by old doubts, but united by a common goal. When they finished, Jackson approached her. Colonel, he said quietly, we're ready to follow you not just because you're in charge, but because you earned it. Sarah felt a swell of pride and relief. The journey wasn't over, but a new chapter had begun. That night, alone in her office, Sarah wrote a report to the base commander outlining the problems and her plan for change. She knew it would ruffle feathers and face resistance. But she also knew it was necessary, because leadership wasn't about power or rank. It was about courage, the courage to face hard truths and do what was right. And Sarah Reynolds was nothing if not brave. The following weeks brought a whirlwind of change at Millbridge Military Training Base. Colonel Sarah Reynolds's report had sparked conversations, some uncomfortable, others long overdue. The base was slowly beginning to confront the issues, festering beneath its disciplined exterior issues of bias, neglect, and the struggle many cadets faced in silence. Sarah felt the pressure every day. Some officers resisted the reforms, seeing them as unnecessary or disruptive. A few whispered behind her back, questioning her leadership. But others stepped forward quietly, offering support, ready to help change the culture for the better. Morning, Sarah received a letter, anonymous but scathing. It accused her of weakening discipline and favoring troublemakers. The writer warned her to watch her back. The message was clear. Not everyone welcomed change. She folded the letter slowly, her hands steady. Threats and doubts had never stopped her before, and they wouldn't now. Her thoughts drifted to the 4 cadets: Jackson, Marcus, Blake, and Tyler. They had begun to show real growth, but Sarah knew trust wasn't built overnight. Old habits die hard, and she could still see the flicker of anger beneath their expressions when they thought no one was looking. One evening, Sarah stayed late, reviewing training schedules and counseling reports. The office door creaked open, and Jackson stepped in hesitantly. "Colonel," he began, his voice quieter than usual. "Can I talk to you?" Sarah gestured to the chair across from her. "Of course, Jackson." He sat down, running a hand through his hair nervously. I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About respect, responsibility, and all that. It's not easy for me. Not easy to change." Sarah nodded, encouraging him to continue. "There's stuff going on with my family," he said, voice rough. "My dad's been sick, and I've been trying to keep it together, but sometimes I just want to give up. That's why I acted out." The room was silent, except for the soft hum of the overhead lights. "Thank you for telling me," Sarah said gently. "You're carrying a heavy burden, Jackson, but you don't have to carry it alone." He looked up, eyes meeting hers with a mix of relief and uncertainty. "I want to do better," he said. "Not just for you, but for me." Sarah smiled. "That's the first step." Their conversation marked a turning point. The walls Jackson had built around himself began to crumble, and Sarah saw a young man not just defiant, but deeply vulnerable. Over the next few weeks, she made it a point to check in regularly with the cadets. She connected them with counselors, helped them find resources, and encouraged open dialogue. Slowly, the atmosphere shifted. The base wasn't perfect. There were still challenges, still whispers, but it was moving towards something better. One afternoon, during a training exercise, disaster nearly struck. A malfunction in the firing range's safety system caused a weapon to jam, putting several cadets in danger. Sarah was the first to react, issuing clear commands that prevented injury and quickly secured the area. Her calm under pressure earned nods of respect from even the most skeptical cadets. Afterward, Jackson approached her again. "You really earned our respect today, Colonel." Sarah felt a deep warmth spread through her chest. This wasn't just about authority. It was about trust built in the fire of real moments. But the victory was bittersweet. The anonymous threats hadn't stopped. One night, Sarah's car was vandalized in the parking lot. The words "Quit now" scrawled in harsh letters across the windshield. The act was personal and meant to intimidate. Sarah reported it immediately, but refused to let fear take hold. Instead, she used the incident to rally the base together, calling a meeting that reminded everyone of their shared mission and the values they stood for. Fear divides us, she said. Courage unites us. We will not be broken by threats or hate. Her words resonated deeply, and in that moment, Sarah knew the fight was far from over, but she wasn't alone. The Soar cadets, once her harshest critics, stood with her stronger and more committed than ever. Together, they faced the future with a newfound sense of purpose. The tension on the base had reached a simmering point. Colonel Sarah Reynolds felt it every time she walked through the hall's whispers, sideways glances, and the undercurrent of resistance that refused to be fully quieted. But amid the unrest, something else was growing too. A quiet, hard-earned respect. After the vandalism to her car, Sarah had taken a stand, not with anger, but with steady resolve. Her message had united many, but the threats were a reminder. That change always invited opposition. Still, she refused to back down. One crisp morning, as the base buzzed with preparation for the upcoming graduation ceremony, Sarah received a call that shook her world. It was Lieutenant Ramirez, her trusted aide. Colonel, there's been an incident at the range. One of the cadets. He's been injured. Sarah's heart pounded. She grabbed her coat and rushed toward the training fields. The scene was chaotic. Paramedics were tending to a young man. Lying on the ground, Marcus. His face was pale, sweat beading on his forehead. His leg was twisted unnaturally. Sarah pushed through the crowd, her voice calm but commanding. Step back, give him space. She knelt beside Marcus, who looked up at her with fear in his eyes. It's going to be okay, she said softly. We're here. The doctors said Marcus had suffered a severe sprain and possible fracture from a fall during a training exercise. The news was serious, but not life-threatening. Sarah stayed by his side, feeling the weight of responsibility heavier than ever. This was more than leadership. It was about the lives entrusted to her care. In the days that followed, Marcus's injury became a rallying point. The cadets, shaken by the incident, began to see the real consequences of carelessness and division. The bonds Sarah had worked so hard to build deepened, forged by shared concern and the need to protect each other. Jackson, Blake, and Tyler took turns visiting Marcus in the infirmary. Their attitudes had shifted from rebellion to genuine camaraderie. One evening, Sarah sat with Marcus alone. You're going to recover, she promised. And when you do, we'll face whatever comes next together. Marcus smiled weakly. Thank you, Colonel, for everything. Outside the hospital room window, the sun set in a blaze of orange and purple, a symbol of hope after darkness. Meanwhile, Sarah's reforms were gaining traction. New training programs emphasized respect, teamwork, and mental health. Slowly, the base culture was transforming, though the road remained difficult. But change often breeds resistance. At a command meeting, a senior officer voiced concerns. Colonel Reynolds, while your efforts are commendable, some believe your approach is too soft. Discipline must come first. Sarah held her ground. Discipline is essential, but respect and understanding build lasting strength. We can't lead by fear. The debate was tense, but Sarah's conviction won quiet nods. She had become a voice for a new kind of leadership, one that demanded strength with compassion. Then, just as the base was preparing for the graduation ceremony, a milestone for the cadets and for Sarah herself, an unexpected revelation surfaced. Lieutenant Ramirez approached Sarah privately. Colonel, we've uncovered evidence linking some of the sabotage incidents to a faction within base trying to undermine your reforms. The betrayal cut deep. People Sarah had trusted were working against her, jealous, threatened, or unwilling to change. But Sarah's spirit did not waver. She called a meeting with her closest officers and the 4 cadets. We face a challenge, not just from outside, but from within. It's time to stand united and expose the truth. Jackson clenched his fists. We're with you, Colonel. Together, they devised a plan to gather proof and confront those undermining the base's unity. The tension mounted, the stakes higher than ever. As the graduation day approached, Sarah prepared not just to celebrate achievement, but to fight. For the future she believed, in a future where respect and strength walked hand in hand. Graduation day dawned crisp and clear over Millbridge Military Training Base. The sky was a brilliant blue, the kind of day that promised new beginnings. The entire base was alive with anticipation. Cadets in crisp uniforms, proud families gathered in folding chairs, and officers ready to celebrate the culmination of months of hard work and sacrifice. Colonel Sarah Reynolds stood tall on the parade ground, watching the scene with a mix of pride and quiet determination. The journey here hadn't been easy. There had been challenges, threats, and moments that tested her strength more than she ever expected. But today, she was ready. As the ceremony began, Sarah's gaze settled on the 4 cadets who had become more than just her charges. They were her allies, her team. Jackson, Marcus, now healed and standing tall. Blake and Tyler stood in formation, their faces reflecting the discipline and respect they'd earned through struggle and growth. Base commander stepped forward to speak, his voice carrying across the crowd. Today, we honor the courage, dedication, and resilience of these cadets. They have overcome obstacles both seen and unseen. Their journey reflects the best of what Millbridge stands for. Sarah's mind flashed back to the early days, the insults, the doubts, the silent battles fought in offices and on training fields. She thought of the vandalized walls, the threats against her, and the fragile trust that had blossomed into something strong. After the speeches, it was time for the awards. When Sarah's name was called to present the Leadership Medal, she felt a surge of emotion. This medal wasn't just hers. It belonged to every cadet who had dared to believe in change, to every officer who stood by her, and to every voice that had been raised for justice. She stepped forward, the crowd quieting. Leadership, she began, is not about rank or power. It's about courage, the courage to face hard truths, to stand up for what is right, and to believe in people even when they don't believe in themselves. Today, I honor those who have shown that courage. She looked directly at Jackson. Jackson, you've grown into a leader who listens, who fights not just for himself, but for his team. You embody the spirit of true leadership. Jackson stepped forward, accepting the medal with a humble nod. Marcus, Sarah continued, your resilience and honesty remind us that strength comes from vulnerability. Blake and Tyler followed, each receiving their own recognition for their perseverance and growth. The crowd erupted in applause, and for the first time in a long while, Sarah felt fully seen, not just as a colonel, but as a leader who had earned respect through sacrifice and truth. Later that evening, as the base quieted and the stars came out, Sarah stood alone by the flagpole. The gentle breeze tugged at her jacket, and she thought about the journey ahead. Sabotage ring had been exposed, the culprits removed from their positions. The base was healing, and Sarah's reforms were taking root. But more than that, she knew the fight for justice and respect was ongoing, both within the military and within society. Her phone buzzed softly. It was a message from Jackson. Thank you, Colonel, for never giving up on us. Sarah smiled, a quiet warmth filling her chest. That message was worth every challenge, every lonely night, every whispered doubt. She looked up at the stars and made a silent promise to keep leading with strength and heart, to keep fighting for those who couldn't yet find their voice. Because true leadership wasn't just about issuing orders in less than a minute. It was about standing firm through every second that followed.